Imagine waking up tomorrow believing every decision you make is entirely your own. You choose what to eat, what to watch, what to buy, who to follow, and how to spend your time. It feels like freedom because no one is standing over you with threats or commands. No one is forcing your hand. Yet beneath this comforting illusion lies a far more unsettling possibility. What if many of these choices were quietly shaped long before you made them? What if your attention, your desires, and even your habits have been carefully guided by invisible systems designed not to liberate you, but to keep you engaged, consuming, and constantly seeking the next moment of pleasure? Modern society celebrates freedom more than almost any civilization in history. We are told we can become anything we want, express ourselves however we choose, and access unlimited information with a device that fits into our pocket. Never before have human beings possessed so many options. Yet, strangely, people report feeling more distracted, more anxious, more dependent, and more emotionally exhausted than ever before. How can a world overflowing with freedom leave so many people feeling trapped? The answer begins with understanding that control has evolved. Throughout history, power was often maintained through force. Kings ruled with armies. Dictators ruled with fear. Those who disobeyed faced punishment. Freedom was limited by visible barriers. Today, however, control rarely needs violence. It is far more effective to create a society in which people willingly surrender their attention because doing so feels pleasurable. Pleasure itself is not the enemy. It is one of humanity's greatest evolutionary gifts. The feeling of pleasure encouraged our ancestors to eat nourishing food, build relationships, explore their environment, and reproduce. Without pleasure, survival would have been much more difficult. The problem begins when this natural reward system is exploited. Technology, advertising, entertainment, and social media have learned to activate the brain's reward circuits with extraordinary precision. Every notification, every endless scroll, every recommended video, every personalized advertisement is carefully designed to trigger another small burst of satisfaction. These rewards seem harmless in isolation. Watching one short video is not dangerous. Checking one notification appears insignificant. Buying something you enjoy is perfectly normal. But the human brain does not respond only to individual moments. It adapts to repeated patterns. Every small reward strengthens a habit. Every habit becomes easier to repeat. Eventually, behaviors that once required conscious choice become automatic. Without realizing it, reaching for the phone becomes as instinctive as breathing. Think about how often silence has become uncomfortable. A few minutes waiting in a line once offered space for observation or thought. Today, many people instinctively unlock their phones before they even realize what they are doing. An elevator ride, a bus journey, a meal alone, or even a brief pause between conversations has become something that must immediately be filled with stimulation. The mind no longer tolerates emptiness because it has been conditioned to expect constant entertainment. This conditioning creates the illusion of freedom. You believe you are choosing to scroll because no one ordered you to do it. Yet your behavior follows predictable patterns engineered by systems that understand your psychology better than you understand yourself. Algorithms study your interests, emotions, fears, and desires. They learn when you are most vulnerable, what keeps your attention longest, and which content is most likely to make you return. The more time you spend engaged, the more valuable your attention becomes. In this economy, your focus is the product. Perhaps the greatest triumph of this system is that it rarely feels oppressive. It feels enjoyable. People willingly spend hours consuming content that leaves them feeling strangely empty afterward. They confuse stimulation with fulfillment. They mistake endless options for genuine freedom. But having unlimited choices means little if your ability to choose consciously has quietly disappeared. This modern prison has no walls because it exists inside the mind. The prisoner carries the prison wherever they go. Even during vacations, family dinners, or moments of natural beauty, the urge to check another message interrupts the experience. Presence is sacrificed for anticipation. Reality competes against an endless stream of digital excitement, and reality almost always loses because it cannot match the carefully engineered intensity of artificial stimulation. This dependency changes more than daily habits. It changes identity itself. The mind gradually becomes reactive instead of reflective. Instead of asking what truly matters, it asks what feels good right now. Long-term goals become difficult because they require patience, discomfort, and delayed gratification. Instant rewards become more attractive than meaningful progress. Reading a challenging book loses its appeal compared to watching endless short videos. Developing a skill feels slow compared to receiving immediate digital validation. The pursuit of mastery is replaced by the pursuit of stimulation. The consequences extend into relationships as well. Genuine human connection requires attention, vulnerability, and patience. Yet constant distraction weakens each of these qualities. Conversations become fragmented by notifications. Shared moments are interrupted by screens. Instead of experiencing life directly, people increasingly document it for approval from strangers. Validation from others begins replacing genuine self-worth. Happiness becomes something measured by reactions rather than experienced from within. Consumer culture reinforces this cycle at every step. Advertising rarely sells products alone. It sells emotional relief. Buy this and you will become more attractive. Purchase that and you will become more successful. Consume this experience and your loneliness will disappear. Every insecurity becomes another market opportunity. Instead of encouraging people to understand their dissatisfaction, society teaches them to purchase temporary comfort. The result is predictable. Satisfaction fades quickly, creating the desire for another purchase, another experience, another distraction. This endless pursuit resembles running on a treadmill. Tremendous effort is invested, yet no real progress is made. Each new pleasure provides excitement for a brief moment before becoming ordinary. The brain adapts remarkably quickly. What once felt exciting soon becomes expected. To recreate the same emotional intensity, greater stimulation becomes necessary. More entertainment, more consumption, more novelty, more distraction. The cycle never truly ends because it was never designed to end. Many people assume freedom means the absence of external restrictions. But real freedom demands something much deeper. It requires the ability to govern oneself. A person controlled by every impulse is not free simply because no one else is controlling them. If every notification commands your attention, if every moment of boredom sends you searching for stimulation, if every uncomfortable emotion must immediately be escaped through pleasure, then your choices are no longer fully your own. You have become obedient to your impulses. This realization can feel uncomfortable because it challenges the story we tell ourselves. Most people prefer believing they are completely independent thinkers. Accepting that invisible systems influence behavior feels threatening. Yet recognizing influence is the first step toward reclaiming autonomy. You cannot resist forces you refuse to acknowledge. History teaches that the most durable forms of power are often invisible. When people willingly cooperate with systems that limit their freedom, resistance becomes unlikely. There is no need for censorship when distraction is more effective. There is no need for oppression when entertainment keeps people occupied. A society constantly chasing pleasure rarely pauses long enough to ask difficult questions about meaning, purpose, or truth. This is why discomfort possesses unexpected value. Moments of silence reveal thoughts that endless entertainment suppresses. Boredom creates space for creativity. Solitude strengthens self-awareness. Reflection exposes habits that constant stimulation keeps hidden. Ironically, the experiences modern culture encourages us to avoid may be the very experiences that restore genuine freedom. The illusion of freedom survives because pleasure feels voluntary. Every click appears insignificant. Every distraction seems harmless. Yet together they shape an entire way of living. A life spent reacting instead of choosing, consuming instead of creating, escaping instead of understanding gradually becomes a life directed by forces outside conscious awareness. Real freedom is not the ability to satisfy every desire the moment it appears. It is the ability to examine those desires before acting upon them. It is the strength to remain present when boredom arrives, to tolerate discomfort without immediately escaping, and to pursue meaning even when pleasure offers an easier alternative. Freedom begins not when the world gives you more choices, but when your mind gains the power to choose wisely among them. The modern prison does not lock its doors because it does not need to. It simply fills every quiet moment with enough pleasure that few people ever think to leave. And perhaps the most unsettling question of all is this: if the chains are invisible and decorated with comfort, would you even recognize that you are wearing them? Have you ever stopped to wonder why it has become so difficult to think deeply? Why sitting alone in silence for even a few minutes feels uncomfortable? Why your mind constantly searches for something to consume, something to watch, something to read, or someone to respond to? Most people assume this is simply the result of living in a fast-paced world, but the truth runs much deeper. The modern individual is not merely distracted. They are conditioned. Day after day, year after year, countless invisible forces shape the way they think, what they desire, and even what they believe to be true. The greatest danger is not that people are forbidden from thinking critically. It is that they gradually lose the ability and even the desire to think critically at all. Conditioning is one of the most powerful psychological forces in human life. It works quietly, often without our awareness. Unlike direct coercion, conditioning does not force behavior through fear. Instead, it shapes behavior through repetition, rewards, habits, and social acceptance. Over time, these influences become so deeply rooted that they feel natural. We begin believing our opinions, preferences, and daily routines are entirely our own, when in reality many of them have been carefully cultivated by the environment surrounding us. From the moment we are born, we begin absorbing messages about how we should think, act, and behave. Our families teach us certain beliefs. Schools teach us what knowledge is considered valuable. Society rewards conformity and often discourages questioning established norms. While education has many positive purposes, it can also unintentionally train people to prioritize correct answers over original thinking. Students spend years memorizing information, passing examinations, and following instructions. Rarely are they encouraged to challenge assumptions, question authority, or explore uncomfortable ideas. Success becomes measured by obedience rather than curiosity. This pattern continues into adulthood. The workplace often rewards productivity above reflection. Employees are expected to complete tasks efficiently, meet deadlines, and adapt to organizational expectations. There is little time left for asking whether the system itself deserves to be questioned. Business becomes a badge of honor. Constant activity replaces thoughtful contemplation. People become so occupied managing daily responsibilities that they never pause to examine whether they are living according to their own values or merely following routines inherited from others. At the same time, technology has transformed the way human attention functions. Every day we encounter thousands of messages competing for our focus. Social media platforms, streaming services, news feeds, advertisements, and digital notifications constantly demand our awareness. Each piece of content is designed to capture attention for just a little longer. Sophisticated algorithms learn our preferences, predict our behavior, and continuously deliver information that keeps us engaged. These systems do not simply respond to human psychology. They actively shape it. One of the most significant consequences of this environment is the decline of sustained attention. Critical thinking requires concentration. It requires the willingness to remain with difficult questions even when immediate answers are unavailable. It demands patience, skepticism, and intellectual humility. But modern digital environments encourage the opposite. Information arrives in short, emotionally charged fragments. Headlines replace analysis. Short videos replace long-form discussions. Emotional reactions replace careful reasoning. Instead of examining evidence, people often react instantly to whatever confirms their existing beliefs. This transformation has profound consequences. A mind accustomed to constant stimulation begins resisting complexity. Difficult books feel exhausting. Long conversations become challenging. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Reflection feels unproductive. As a result, many people unconsciously avoid activities that strengthen critical thinking because those activities no longer provide immediate psychological rewards. Another powerful force shaping modern thought is social validation. Human beings naturally seek acceptance from others. Throughout history, belonging to a group increased the chances of survival. Today, this instinct has been amplified by digital platforms where approval is measured through likes, shares, comments, and followers. Every interaction provides subtle feedback about which opinions are rewarded and which opinions are ignored or criticized. Gradually, people begin adjusting their thoughts and expressions to maximize social acceptance rather than pursue truth. This creates a dangerous cycle. Individuals stop asking whether an idea is true and instead ask whether it will be popular. Public opinion becomes more influential than independent judgment. Fear of rejection discourages honest inquiry. Many people remain silent not because they lack ideas but because they fear social consequences. Over time, conformity becomes easier than courage. Advertising contributes to this conditioning in equally subtle ways. Modern marketing rarely focuses only on products. Instead, it shapes identities and aspirations. It tells people what success should look like, what beauty should resemble, what happiness should feel like, And what kind of life deserves admiration? The result is that many desires no longer emerge naturally from within. They are manufactured externally. People chase lifestyles they never consciously chose because they have been repeatedly exposed to carefully constructed images of success. Entertainment also plays an important role. Entertainment itself is not harmful. Stories, music, films, and art enrich human life. The problem arises when entertainment becomes constant. When every moment of discomfort is immediately filled with amusement, opportunities for reflection disappear. Boredom, once considered unpleasant, actually serves an important psychological purpose. It encourages imagination, creativity, and introspection. Without moments of mental stillness, the mind rarely examines itself. The philosopher Aldous Huxley understood this dynamic with remarkable insight. He imagined a society where people would not need to be oppressed through violence because they would willingly surrender their freedom in exchange for endless pleasure and distraction. They would become so absorbed by comfort that they would lose interest in questioning authority or seeking deeper meaning. Although his vision was fictional, many aspects of modern society resemble this prediction. People are rarely prevented from thinking critically. Instead, they are constantly distracted from doing so. Perhaps the most alarming consequence of conditioning is that it often feels invisible. People believe they are acting freely because they experience no obvious external force controlling them. Yet invisible influences shape countless decisions every day. Which news stories receive attention? Which products appear desirable? Which opinions seem acceptable? Which fears dominate public conversation? Which goals people spend their lives pursuing? Much of this occurs beneath conscious awareness. Critical thinking serves as the antidote to this invisible conditioning. It begins with simple but uncomfortable questions. Why do I believe this? Where did this idea originate? Who benefits if I continue thinking this way? What evidence supports my assumptions? Could I be mistaken? These questions require intellectual courage because they challenge certainty. They force individuals to examine beliefs they have accepted for years without scrutiny. Developing this mindset is neither easy nor comfortable. It often leads to uncertainty before clarity emerges. People accustomed to simple answers may resist complexity because ambiguity feels unsettling. Yet genuine wisdom rarely begins with certainty. It begins with curiosity. The willingness to admit, perhaps I do not know as much as I assumed. Reading widely, engaging with opposing viewpoints, spending time in solitude, and practicing careful reflection all strengthen the capacity for independent thought. These habits slow the mind down. They create distance between stimulus and response. Instead of reacting automatically, individuals begin choosing consciously. They become less vulnerable to manipulation because they no longer accept every message at face value. Ultimately, the greatest threat to freedom is not censorship alone. It is the gradual erosion of the desire to think independently. A society that abandons critical thinking becomes remarkably easy to influence because people willingly accept narratives that require the least mental effort. They inherit opinions instead of forming them. They consume information instead of examining it. They follow trends instead of pursuing truth. True freedom begins inside the mind. It begins the moment an individual decides that comfort is less valuable than understanding, that truth is more important than approval, and that asking difficult questions is worth the discomfort it creates. Because the moment people reclaim the ability to think critically, they reclaim something even more valuable than knowledge. They reclaim ownership of their own minds. Human beings naturally avoid pain. It is an instinct deeply rooted in evolution. Pain warns us of danger, encourages us to protect ourselves, and motivates us to seek better conditions. But pain has another function that modern society often ignores. It shapes character. It develops patience, courage, wisdom, and emotional strength. Without struggle, many of the qualities we admire in extraordinary people could never exist. The strongest individuals are rarely those who have experienced the least suffering. More often, they are those who have learned how to transform suffering into growth. Modern culture, however, presents a very different message. It teaches that discomfort is a problem to be eliminated immediately. Feeling lonely? Open a social media app. Feeling anxious? Distract yourself with endless entertainment. Feeling rejected?
Seek instant validation online.
Feeling bored? Scroll until something captures your attention. Every uncomfortable emotion is treated as an emergency requiring immediate relief. Instead of asking why we feel empty, We search for something that temporarily fills the emptiness. This constant pursuit of comfort slowly changes the way the mind functions. Emotional tolerance begins to weaken. Small frustrations that previous generations might have considered ordinary suddenly feel overwhelming. Waiting becomes unbearable.
Delayed gratification feel impossible.
Patience disappears because modern life continually rewards immediacy. Everything arrives within seconds. Food is delivered instantly. Movies begin with a single click. Messages receive immediate replies. Entire worlds of entertainment exist only a few taps away. Gradually, the brain forgets how to wait. The consequences extend far beyond convenience. When the mind loses its ability to tolerate discomfort, it also loses much of its resilience. Resilience is not something people are born with. It develops through repeated encounters with challenge. Every obstacle overcome teaches the brain that difficulty is survivable. Every failure successfully endured strengthens confidence for future struggles. Every disappointment processed with patience expands emotional maturity. Remove these experiences, and resilience has no opportunity to grow. Consider the process of learning any meaningful skill. Whether someone wants to master a language, play a musical instrument, build a successful business, or develop physical strength, progress always requires discomfort. Mistakes must be made. Frustration must be tolerated. Slow improvement must be accepted. There are moments when quitting feels easier than continuing. Yet these very moments shape competence. The satisfaction of genuine achievement comes precisely because it demanded persistence. Now compare this to the culture of instant gratification. Why spend years developing expertise when quick entertainment offers immediate satisfaction? Why struggle through difficult conversations when endless distractions provide temporary escape? Why confront personal weaknesses when digital validation can briefly make us feel successful? Little by little, comfort replaces growth as the highest priority. This psychological shift creates an unexpected form of fragility. Individuals begin interpreting ordinary challenges as unbearable crises. Minor criticism feels like a personal attack. Temporary loneliness becomes intolerable isolation. Everyday setbacks trigger overwhelming emotional reactions. This is not because people are inherently weaker than previous generations. It is because many have had fewer opportunities to develop emotional endurance. A muscle that is never exercised gradually weakens. The same principle applies to the human mind. One of the greatest ironies of modern life is that the technologies designed to reduce suffering often create new forms of suffering. Endless entertainment relieves boredom temporarily but weakens attention over time. Constant social validation provides short-term confidence while increasing dependence on external approval. Unlimited convenience reduces physical effort but often contributes to declining physical and mental health. Every solution carries hidden costs that become visible only after years of repetition. Aldous Huxley captured this danger through the fictional drug Soma. In his imagined society, every unpleasant emotion could be erased instantly with a chemical escape. Citizens remained peaceful, obedient, and apparently happy because they never confronted emotional pain. There were no deep crises because there were no deep reflections. There were no revolutions because discomfort never lasted long enough to inspire change. Their happiness came at the cost of freedom, individuality, and authentic human experience. Although modern society lacks Soma in its fictional form, it possesses countless substitutes. Endless scrolling, binge-watching, compulsive shopping, processed foods, addictive games, online validation, and constant digital stimulation all serve similar psychological functions. They provide immediate emotional relief without addressing the underlying causes of dissatisfaction. Instead of solving problems, they postpone them. The danger of this cycle is that avoidance gradually becomes habitual. Rather than asking difficult questions about life, relationships, purpose, or identity, people become experts at escaping those questions altogether. Silence becomes frightening because silence allows buried thoughts to emerge. Solitude becomes uncomfortable because it forces confrontation with oneself. Constant stimulation becomes necessary not because it creates happiness but because it prevents awareness of deeper dissatisfaction. Perhaps the greatest cost of avoiding discomfort is the loss of personal transformation. Every meaningful change begins with discomfort. The decision to improve one's health often begins with dissatisfaction. The courage to leave unhealthy relationships emerges from emotional pain. Creative breakthroughs frequently arise from periods of uncertainty. Spiritual growth often begins with existential questions. If discomfort is eliminated immediately, These opportunities for transformation disappear before they can unfold. History repeatedly demonstrates that adversity has shaped humanity's greatest achievements. Scientific discoveries emerged through years of failure. Great works of literature often reflected profound suffering. Social movements arose because individuals refused to remain comfortable in unjust systems. Personal greatness has rarely been born from endless comfort. It has emerged from people willing to endure temporary hardship in pursuit of something greater than immediate pleasure. This is why emotionally resilient individuals are difficult to manipulate. They do not panic when discomfort appears. They can tolerate uncertainty without desperately seeking easy answers. They resist emotional manipulation because fear and temporary pleasure no longer dictate their decisions. They understand that meaningful goals often require sacrifice. Such individuals possess an inner stability that external circumstances cannot easily control. By contrast, emotionally dependent individuals become remarkably vulnerable to influence. If comfort becomes their highest value, anyone capable of providing comfort gains power over them. Companies capture their attention through endless entertainment. Advertisers exploit insecurities by promising emotional relief through consumption. Social platforms maintain engagement by delivering continuous stimulation. Political movements manipulate fear and hope because emotionally fragile populations react impulsively rather than thoughtfully. This does not mean suffering should be glorified for its own sake. Pain alone guarantees nothing. Some suffering destroys rather than strengthens. The difference lies in how discomfort is approached. Meaningful struggle is not pointless misery. It is the voluntary acceptance of temporary hardship in service of long-term growth. It is choosing discipline over impulse, patience over immediacy, and purpose over comfort. Learning to coexist with discomfort is one of the most liberating skills a person can develop. It begins with small acts of resistance. Sitting quietly without reaching for the phone. Completing difficult work before seeking entertainment. Exercising despite temporary exhaustion. Having honest conversations instead of avoiding conflict. Reading challenging books rather than consuming endless fragments of information. Each act strengthens the mind's capacity to remain calm in the presence of discomfort. Over time, something remarkable happens. The experiences that once felt unbearable lose much of their power. Boredom becomes an opportunity for creativity. Solitude becomes a source of clarity. Failure becomes valuable feedback. Uncertainty becomes a space for possibility instead of fear. The individual no longer depends on constant pleasure to maintain emotional balance. The hidden cost of constant happiness is not simply that pleasure fades. It is that endless comfort gradually steals the qualities required for genuine freedom. A life organized entirely around avoiding pain becomes increasingly small, increasingly predictable, and increasingly controlled by external rewards. But a life willing to embrace meaningful discomfort becomes expansive. It develops courage where fear once lived, wisdom where certainty once dominated, and resilience where fragility once existed. In the end, happiness is not the absence of pain. It is the confidence that pain can be faced without losing oneself. Real strength is not found in escaping every hardship, but in discovering that hardship, when approached with purpose and courage, can become the very force that shapes the strongest version of who we are. What are you truly chasing every single day? Is it happiness, or is it simply another brief moment of pleasure? At first glance, these two ideas seem almost identical. Most people spend their lives believing that if they can collect enough pleasurable experiences, they will eventually feel fulfilled. They work harder to buy more things, seek more entertainment, gain more followers, receive more praise, and experience more excitement. Yet despite living in an age with unprecedented access to comfort and convenience, millions of people still struggle with feelings of emptiness. This contradiction reveals one of the greatest misunderstandings of modern life. Pleasure and purpose are not the same, and confusing them may be the reason so many people feel lost. Pleasure is one of the most powerful forces influencing human behavior. It is immediate, emotional, and deeply rewarding. A delicious meal satisfies hunger. A compliment boosts confidence. A vacation provides relaxation. Listening to music, watching a favorite movie, laughing with friends, or enjoying nature can all bring genuine joy. There is nothing inherently wrong with pleasure. It is a natural and healthy part of life. Problems begin only when pleasure stops being something we experience and becomes something we constantly chase. The modern world encourages this pursuit at every moment. Companies compete for attention by promising instant satisfaction. Advertisements suggest that happiness is only one purchase away. Social media convinces us that another notification, another like, or another follower will finally make us feel valued. Streaming platforms ensure there is always another episode waiting. Online stores promise immediate gratification with a single click. Every corner of modern culture whispers the same message: you deserve to feel good right now. The difficulty is that pleasure has one defining characteristic: it never lasts. Every pleasurable experience fades. The excitement of buying something new slowly disappears. The praise received today is forgotten tomorrow. The thrill of success eventually becomes normal. Human psychology is designed this way. The brain adapts remarkably quickly to positive experiences. What once felt extraordinary soon becomes ordinary, requiring greater stimulation to recreate the same emotional intensity. This process, often called hedonic adaptation, keeps people trapped in an endless cycle of wanting more. Think about how many goals people pursue believing they will finally make them happy. A promotion at work, a larger house, a luxury car, more money, more popularity, more recognition. Each achievement produces excitement for a while, but eventually life returns to normal. The emotional high fades, leaving behind another desire waiting to be fulfilled. The finish line keeps moving further away. Satisfaction becomes temporary because pleasure was never designed to provide lasting meaning. Purpose operates according to completely different principles. Unlike pleasure, purpose is not an emotion. It is a direction. It is the deep conviction that your life is contributing to something greater than immediate comfort. Purpose does not eliminate suffering. Instead, it gives suffering significance. When people know why they endure hardship, they discover strength they never believed they possessed. History provides countless examples of individuals who willingly accepted extraordinary difficulty because they believed their lives served a meaningful purpose. Scientists dedicated decades to research without guarantees of success. Artists spent years perfecting their craft while living in poverty. Explorers crossed dangerous oceans searching for new worlds. Parents sacrificed personal comfort to build better futures for their children. None of these journeys were driven by constant pleasure. They were sustained by purpose. One of the clearest demonstrations of this truth comes from psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl. During his imprisonment in Nazi concentration camps, Frankl observed that survival depended on more than physical strength. Those who discovered meaning, whether through love, hope, faith, or the dream of seeing family again, often demonstrated remarkable resilience despite unimaginable suffering. Frankl concluded that human beings can endure almost any hardship if they possess a reason to endure it. Purpose became stronger than pain. This insight challenges one of modern society's deepest assumptions. Many people believe the goal of life is to avoid suffering whenever possible. But suffering itself is not always the enemy. Meaningless suffering destroys people. Meaningful suffering transforms them. A student studying late into the night experiences exhaustion, but that exhaustion serves education. An athlete accepts physical pain because it develops strength. An entrepreneur tolerates uncertainty because they believe in their vision. Parents sacrifice sleep because they love their children. In each case, discomfort becomes bearable because it serves something larger than immediate pleasure. The danger of living only for pleasure is that pleasure cannot guide a meaningful life. It always follows emotion rather than values. If people make every decision based solely on what feels good in the present moment, they gradually lose the ability to pursue goals requiring patience, discipline, and sacrifice. Difficult conversations are avoided because they are uncomfortable. Long-term projects remain unfinished because progress feels slow. Healthy habits collapse whenever immediate temptations appear. Life becomes reactive instead of intentional. Purpose, however, changes the entire relationship with difficulty. Instead of asking, "What feels good today?" a purposeful person asks, "What matters most in the long run?" This simple shift transforms daily decisions. Temporary discomfort becomes acceptable because it contributes to lasting fulfillment. Discipline no longer feels like punishment. It becomes an investment in something meaningful. Modern society often discourages this way of thinking because purpose cannot be sold as easily as pleasure. Purpose requires introspection. It requires silence, reflection, patience, and honest self-examination. It demands that people ask difficult questions about who they are and what kind of life they truly want to build. These questions rarely produce immediate answers. They require time. Pleasure, on the other hand, is instantly marketable. Every advertisement promises a faster solution, easier success, greater excitement, or immediate satisfaction. The economy benefits when people remain emotionally dependent on constant consumption. Individuals who continually seek external stimulation become predictable consumers. They purchase temporary relief instead of pursuing lasting transformation. Purpose creates independence. Someone who discovers genuine meaning becomes less vulnerable to manipulation because external rewards lose much of their power. They no longer need constant approval to feel valuable. They no longer require endless entertainment to escape themselves. They become capable of sitting quietly with their own thoughts because they are moving towards something meaningful rather than running away from emptiness. Finding purpose is rarely dramatic. Many people expect purpose to arrive as a sudden revelation, but more often it develops gradually through commitment. It grows as people dedicate themselves to worthwhile goals, meaningful relationships, honest work, creative expression, personal growth, or service to others. Purpose is not discovered by endlessly searching for happiness. It is built through repeated acts of responsibility and intentional living. This explains why some of the happiest people are not those with the easiest lives. Many individuals carrying enormous responsibilities also experience profound fulfillment. Doctors caring for patients, teachers shaping young minds, parents raising children, volunteers helping vulnerable communities, and artists creating meaningful work all face stress, uncertainty, and sacrifice. Yet many describe their lives as deeply meaningful because their efforts contribute to something beyond themselves. By contrast, lives devoted entirely to personal pleasure often become surprisingly empty. Endless vacations lose their excitement. Luxury becomes ordinary. Entertainment becomes repetitive. Without purpose, even abundance begins to feel hollow. The absence of struggle eventually creates the absence of meaning. This does not mean pleasure should be rejected. Healthy pleasure enriches life when it exists alongside purpose. Enjoying good food, celebrating achievements, spending time with loved ones, appreciating beauty, and experiencing joy are essential parts of being human. The danger arises only when pleasure replaces purpose as life's highest objective. Pleasure makes an excellent companion but a terrible master. Every person eventually faces moments when pleasure disappears. Illness, loss, failure, aging, disappointment, and uncertainty are unavoidable parts of life. During those seasons, pleasure alone offers little support. Purpose, however, remains. It provides direction when emotions fluctuate. It reminds people why they continue moving forward despite temporary hardship. Perhaps the most important question anyone can ask is not, "What will make me happy today?" but, "What kind of person am I becoming?" That question shifts attention away from immediate gratification toward lasting character. It encourages choices based on values rather than impulses. It transforms daily actions into steps toward a meaningful future instead of isolated attempts to escape discomfort. In the end, pleasure offers moments. Purpose offers a life. Pleasure satisfies desires for an instant, but purpose shapes identity for lifetime. Pleasure fades as quickly as it arrives, while purpose grows stronger through every challenge overcome. Those who build their lives around temporary happiness often spend years searching for something they can never quite grasp. But those who dedicate themselves to meaningful purpose discover that fulfillment was never hidden inside another moment of pleasure. It was waiting inside the life they chose to build. Knowledge alone has never changed a human life. Every generation has possessed brilliant ideas, profound philosophies, and powerful truths. Yet countless people have remained trapped in the very habits they claim to understand. Why? Because awareness without action creates nothing more than the illusion of progress. You may now recognize how modern society uses endless pleasure, distraction, and instant gratification to capture your attention. But recognition is only the beginning. The real question is whether you are willing to act differently. Freedom is not granted the moment you see the prison. Freedom begins the moment you decide to walk out of it. The first truth you must accept is that escaping this cycle will not feel comfortable. Your mind has spent years, perhaps decades, adapting to a lifestyle of constant stimulation. It has learned that every moment of boredom should be filled, every uncomfortable emotion should be escaped, and every difficult task should be postponed if something easier is available. These habits were not created overnight, and they will not disappear overnight. The brain naturally resists change because familiar routines require less energy than building new ones. This is why so many people return to old behaviors, even after promising themselves they will change. It is not because they lack intelligence. It is because conditioning is powerful. Imagine someone who has lived in a noisy city for years. At first, the The constant sounds of traffic, crowds, and machines seem overwhelming. Eventually, the brain adapts until the noise becomes almost invisible. But if that person suddenly spends a night deep in the mountains, surrounded by complete silence, the silence itself may feel uncomfortable. The absence of noise becomes strange because the mind has forgotten what stillness feels like. The same thing happens with modern distractions. Constant stimulation becomes normal, while silence begins to feel unsettling. Yet it is within that silence that genuine clarity begins to emerge. One of the most powerful ways to reclaim your freedom is to deliberately reduce your dependence on artificial pleasure. This does not mean rejecting happiness or living a life of unnecessary suffering. It means becoming conscious of what controls you. Ask yourself a simple question. What can I not comfortably live without for even a single day? Is it social media?
Endless videos?
Constant notifications? Sugary foods? Online validation? Whatever immediately comes to mind deserves your attention because dependence often hides behind the things we defend most passionately. When you temporarily remove these constant sources of stimulation, something surprising happens. At first, your mind protests. You feel restless. You reach for your phone without thinking. Minutes seem unusually long. Boredom feels unbearable. Many people mistake this discomfort as proof that they need the stimulation, but in reality, it often reveals the depth of their dependence. Just as a muscle aches when exercised after years of inactivity, the mind experiences resistance when it begins reclaiming its independence. If you remain patient, however, another transformation slowly begins. Your attention starts to stabilize. Ordinary experiences become interesting again. A conversation becomes more engaging. A walk outdoors feels more peaceful. Reading a book becomes easier. Creativity begins returning because the mind finally has room to think instead of constantly reacting. You discover that satisfaction does not require endless excitement. Sometimes it grows quietly from presence itself. Another essential step toward freedom is rebuilding your relationship with discomfort. Modern culture teaches us to avoid pain whenever possible, but growth has always required temporary discomfort. Every meaningful achievement demands it. Physical fitness requires physical effort. Education requires mental effort. Honest relationships require emotional vulnerability. Character requires discipline. The problem is not discomfort. The problem is our refusal to tolerate it. Begin practicing small acts of voluntary discomfort. Wake up without immediately checking your phone. Sit quietly for 15 minutes without any entertainment. Finish an important task before rewarding yourself with leisure. Exercise even when motivation is absent. Read something challenging instead of endlessly consuming short content. Have the difficult conversation you have been avoiding. Each small victory strengthens your ability to act according to your values rather than your impulses. This process teaches one of life's greatest lessons. Feelings are temporary. The urge to quit eventually fades. The craving for distraction loses intensity. Anxiety rises and falls like a wave. The more often you experience discomfort without immediately escaping it, the more confidence you develop in your ability to handle life's inevitable challenges. You stop fearing difficult emotions because you realize they do not control you unless you allow them to. Equally important is learning to question your own thoughts and desires. Not every desire deserves to be followed. Not every impulse reflects your authentic self. Modern systems constantly compete for your attention because attention has become one of the world's most valuable resources. Every advertisement, recommendation, notification, and algorithm attempts to shape your behavior. This makes self-awareness more important than ever. Before acting on an impulse, pause and ask yourself a few honest questions. Why do I want this? Is this desire truly mine, or was it created by something outside me? Will this decision move me closer to the life I want, or is it simply another temporary escape? These questions interrupt automatic behavior. They create space between stimulus and response. Within that space lies genuine freedom. Reading also becomes a revolutionary act in a world dominated by fragmented attention. Long books demand patience. They train concentration. They expose you to ideas that cannot be reduced to short videos or catchy headlines. Reading philosophy, history, psychology, literature, and biographies expand your perspective beyond the narrow limits of algorithmic recommendations. It reminds you that your worldview should not be determined by whatever appears on your screen today. Silence deserves a special place in this journey as well. Most people fear silence because silence removes distractions. Without constant stimulation, buried thoughts begin surfacing. Questions about identity, relationships, purpose, regrets, and dreams become impossible to ignore. This can feel uncomfortable, but it is also where genuine self-understanding begins. A person who never spends time alone with their own mind will always depend on external noise to avoid themselves. As your awareness grows, you may notice another unexpected challenge. Not everyone around you will understand your transformation. Friends may question why you spend less time online. Family members may not understand your desire for solitude or reflection. Some people may even mock your attempts to live more intentionally. This reaction often has little to do with you. Sometimes your willingness to change reminds others of changes they know they should make but continue avoiding. It is tempting to seek approval for every decision, but authentic freedom requires accepting that not everyone will agree with your path. If your values depend entirely on the opinions of others, you remain emotionally controlled by forces outside yourself. Learning to stand alone when necessary is one of the greatest signs of psychological maturity. At the center of this transformation lies one final principle. Replace distraction with creation. Instead of endlessly consuming content, create something meaningful. Write your thoughts. Learn a skill. Build a business. Practice an instrument. Exercise your body. Volunteer your time. Deepen your relationships. Every act of creation strengthens your sense of agency because it reminds you that you are capable of contributing to the world rather than merely consuming it. Creation also reconnects you with purpose. A person actively building something meaningful has less need for constant entertainment because their attention is invested in growth rather than escape. Their satisfaction comes not from temporary stimulation but from witnessing steady progress toward goals that truly matter. None of these changes happen instantly. There will be setbacks. Some days old habits will return. Some moments of weakness are inevitable. The goal is not perfection but direction. Every conscious choice weakens the old patterns and strengthens the new ones. Every decision to remain present instead of distracted becomes another small act of freedom. In the end, breaking free from the cycle of pleasure is not about rejecting happiness. It is about reclaiming ownership of your own mind. It is about becoming someone who chooses rather than reacts, who creates rather than merely consumes, who seeks meaning instead of endless stimulation. The world will continue offering countless distractions, promising comfort at every turn. Those offers will never disappear. But the greatest victory is discovering that you no longer need to accept them. Real freedom is quiet. It does not announce itself with excitement or applause. It appears in the ordinary moments when you choose discipline over impulse, purpose over pleasure, reflection over distraction, and truth over comfort. These choices may seem small, but repeated over months and years, they transform not only your habits but your entire life. And perhaps that is the greatest act of rebellion in a world determined to keep you endlessly distracted. To live with intention, to think independently, and to become the author of your own mind.